A federal judge in their own right is super powerful and needs to be respected. But a judge who's been affirmed and confirmed by 3 separate appellate courts, all unanimous, including 9-0 at the United States Supreme Court, well, that's a federal judge of a whole different quality. And I wouldn't screw with Judge Paula Zenis in Maryland, but the Trump administration continues to. As publicly it attacks her, goes after her, calls her radically, but in private, it's trying to figure out a way to get out of the corner that it backed itself into in the fight it picked with the Supreme Court over Armando Abrego Garcia. And we got some new results because now the judge, riding high after being affirmed not once but twice by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals by 2 separate panels, 3-0 apiece, and the Supreme Court 9-0, she's not taking any guff. As she said in a recent hearing, it ends now. The way the Trump administration is handling this case and their bad faith and their willful violations of her orders. What does she do next? We cover it all on Legal AF, the podcast. And here's a clip.
So District Court Judge Zenis is very frustrated because if you remember, she ordered expedited discovery in this case, meaning you're going to take depositions. We're going to figure out what happened, who did what, why, interrogatories, all that kind of stuff. And she basically, in another short order, I think it was 7 or 8 pages, she said that the Trump administration is not acting in good faith and that this expedited fact-finding process for Abrego Garcia was intentional non-compliance with their obligation to produce information. I mean, those are fighting words to have a judge say that. She issues this 8-page order, extremely critical of how the DOJ has been navigating this whole process. And she's basically going after them and saying, look, you're not complying with the order to, quote, facilitate his return, and that's the term of art here, to facilitate his return from El Salvador. A couple of quotes that I'm pulling out of the order. So, quote, for weeks, the defendants have sought refuge behind vague and unsubstantiated assertions of privilege, using them as a shield of obstruction and to obstruct discovery and evade compliance with the court orders. Defendants have known, at least since last week, that this court required specific legal and factual showings to support any claim of privilege, yet they've continued to rely on boilerplate assertions. That ends now. They're asserting some vague kind of government privilege, but they're not explaining it because there is no such thing as a government, just a vague government privilege. So she ordered them and said, look, you have to provide me with more specific legal and factual basis for why you're invoking this vague privilege in order to avoid providing any written discovery to Abrego Garcia's attorneys that they've been seeking. And so, she reiterates that she's expressly warned defendants and the counsel to adhere to these discovery obligations. Don't just give boilerplate answers, which people often do in interrogatories. You admit, you deny, or whatever it is. You really kind of just put these boilerplate answers. She wants real substantive answers. And she's saying things like this is a willful refusal to comply with this court's discovery order. I mean, those are very, very, very strong words for a federal judge. And this is this is just unbelievable, I think, what she's setting up here. And you've said it a couple of times that this is a complete setup for for holding somebody in contempt. But yeah, judges are getting sick and tired of this farce that's going on with Abrego Garcia, right? You've got the Supreme Court's basically saying you got to facilitate his return back. And then you've got Stephen Miller with the New York Times article crossing out, he basically writes in red pen, over the title, he's not coming back. He kind of corrects what he says is the New York Times, title of the article about it. And they're just basically giving the middle finger to the courts, to all the courts, including the Supreme Court and everywhere in between. And Judge Zenis she's had it, and she's absolutely not, she's not going to have it much longer. So, she basically, again, calls what the government's doing a false premise. She's accusing them of lying. And, she says the defendants and their counsel well know that the falsehood lies not in any supposed premise, but in their continued mischaracterization of the Supreme Court's order. That order made clear that the court properly required the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to assure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. And this is, the interesting thing about all of this is there's two different laws that they could send him under. Kind of a criminal law under the Alien Enemies Act, which is this old-timey 1800s law that basically they use to to deport certain people to Socote, this El Salvadorian prison. And then there's just good old-fashioned immigration law that also you use that they're using to deport people as well. But when you're on this soil, you have certain constitutional rights. You have the right, for example, to not have cruel and unusual punishment. So if he's relying on the Alien Enemies Act, think of an extreme example. Could he send somebody under the Alien Enemies Act that he's removing under the statute, sending them to jail in, say, a war-torn country? Let's say he's going to send them to the Taliban. Can he do that? No, that would be considered cruel and unusual punishment. They're not being afforded their due process rights, which you get in this country. And you're starting to get really sharp language from judges, whether it's Wilkinson, Zenis, or the Supreme Court itself, about how the Constitution matters, rights matter. You can't just do that. You can't just sweep people up and send them away without any semblance of due process. And what you certainly can't do is obstruct and lie to the court about it. And that's what's happening. That's what's being set up here. This is either going to come to some kind of showdown where people are held in contempt, and we see whether the Trump administration will defy court orders or whether he'll capitulate. And you gave a hot take earlier today, Popok, where you said in one of the interrogatories you thought that they buried in there something that seems to suggest that they're taking the diplomatic route.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'll start with that. It wasn't supposed to see the light of day, but because they're screwing around with discovery with the judge, the other side filed their responses, the government's responses to interrogatories, questions and answers under oath in writing. And in the response to interrogatory number 1, this is that timeline that we're laying out here, right? Welcome back. While you're here on Legal AF, the YouTube channel, take a moment, hit the subscribe button. We're adding 70,000 or so subscribers a month. Be the 70,000th and one. The bigger we get, the more your voice is heard, and you'll get reminders of our programming here because of it. That's a podcast we've been doing for the last 4.5 years. It's called Legal AF, the podcast. It's top 13 in the world, and that's, again, a testament to everybody in our audience. I really do appreciate you. We want to move up and get to the top and join our brothers who are the podcast of the year and just won the Webby. And we want to join them on the podium as well with your help. So Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern time on the Midas Touch Network, you can watch our recording of Legal AF. And then, of course, you can pick up the audio or the video version anytime you want. And on the audio side, you can get us on any podcast platform that you use. Just plug in Legal AF. So until my next report on anything Legal AF, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.